Students across the country are starting to go back to class this week. It feels like this gets earlier and earlier every year. I mean, it's just the beginning of August soon. Well, this will be the start of the year for the first full school year of the Trump administration. Now, the president has promised major changes his Secretary of Education has pushed for decades.
She's loved by some.
Great honor and privilege.
And loathed by others. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos is one of President Donald Trump's more controversial cabinet secretaries. She was confirmed by the slimmest margin possible, a tiebreaker vote cast by Vice President Mike Pence.
The Vice President votes in the affirmative and the nomination is confirmed.
Since then, she's pushed to expand school choice and voucher programs, allowing more federal money to be spent on charter, private, and church-sponsored schools. Critics say at the expense of traditional public schools.
I believe we must change the way we think about funding education and invest in children, not in buildings.
In addition to his proposed $9.2 billion cut to the Education Department, President Trump wants to shift an additional $1.4 billion to school choice programs in his budget. Limits on that money have become a sticking point. At a congressional hearing in May, Secretary DeVos refused to say whether federal funds would be blocked from schools that discriminate against students on the basis of things like race or gender identity.
There's no situation of discrimination or exclusion that if a state approved it for its voucher program, that you would step in and say that's not how we're going to use our federal dollars.
The bottom line is we believe that parents are the best equipped to make choices for their children's schooling and education decisions.
DeVos says she does not support discrimination and that schools receiving federal money must adhere to federal law, but federal law does not explicitly protect the rights of all LGBT students. In June, the independent U.S. Commission on Civil Rights launched an administration-wide investigation highlighting Secretary DeVos's testimony and proposed staffing cuts to the Education Department's Office for Civil Rights. The DeVos hire who heads that office, Acting Director Candace Jackson, says changes are coming. During the Obama administration, the office began releasing names of colleges and universities under investigation for their handling of sexual violence and harassment complaints. Jackson calls it a list of shame, adding that our job isn't to threaten, punish, or facilitate drawing media or public attention.
So let's talk more about school choice. And there's a 2015 Stanford study that looked at charter school performance. It found that in 41 urban regions, here are the numbers, more than half the students in charter schools had math scores that were the same or worse than students in traditional public schools. 62% scored the same or worse in reading. Now, I spoke with Lily Eskelsen Garcia, National Education Association president, and Richard Zimmer, a former congressman from New Jersey, school choice advocate, just a few days ago. And I started by asking, does that performance justify the proposed investment?
I wouldn't look just at the Stanford study. The best charter schools provide measurably better education than the traditional public schools in their area.
So Lily, let me come to you. Overall, across all grades, we found that implementing any of the school improvement grant funded models had no significant impacts on math or reading test scores, high school graduation, or college enrollment. So just injecting money into failing schools doesn't seem to be the answer.
It's very simple. Anybody could do this without a federal grant. Go into the best public schools in your state. Anybody could do that. Go in, walk around, and see what they've got there to help those kids. Gifted programs, athletics, arts. They've got a library. They've got a librarian. That's like finding a unicorn in some schools. And they've got the staff and they've got the programs. Kids have access and opportunity.
Well, Secretary DeVos has been advocating for school choice for a very long time now, especially in her home state of Michigan. She and her husband through their philanthropic work. And I wanted to listen to something she said in the past couple of months, Congressman, and it really pricked a lot of people. Her comparison here with school choice and ride sharing. Watch this.
Just like the traditional taxi system revolted against ride sharing, so too does the education establishment feel threatened by the rise of school choice. Nobody mandates that you take an Uber or Lyft over a taxi, nor should they. But if you think ride sharing is the best option for you, the government shouldn't get in your way.
What did she mean by that, Congressman, from your perspective? Because state constitutions don't guarantee a cheap and comfortable ride to a restaurant, but they do guarantee free public education.
Yes, they do. And the best way to promote a free education is to have competition. And the problem is that in our inner cities particularly, we have very low graduation rates for blacks, for Hispanics, and those parents deserve a choice. I understand why Lily wants more money spent, but the fact is that we've tripled our expenditures on an after-inflation basis in the last 40 years on public education, and we haven't seen comparable results.
And I want to move on to another issue here. I want to talk about discrimination specifically, and why Secretary DeVos, not during her confirmation or months later during discussions with members of Congress, testimony over the proposed budget, has not said specifically that no federal money will go to charter schools as part of any voucher program or any scholarships funded by the federal government, any school that discriminates on admission based on race or LGBT status or special needs. Why hasn't she said that explicitly?
Well, she should say that, but she is a strong proponent of devolving education responsibility to local school districts and to states, and that was what she didn't want the federal government to be dictating the policy. But I think that in those respects she's wrong.
Now, Lily, you sent a letter to DeVos a couple of months ago, and you've given her until September to respond. And if she doesn't respond, you've said that she should resign. Now, I should say that the NEA has called for President Obama's first Secretary of Education to resign, President Bush's first Secretary of Education to resign. But you've said that you're not willing to work with her. How can you get anything that you want accomplished to actually come to fruition if you don't work with this secretary?
This isn't partisan for us. We just care about doing the right thing for students. And when we have a Secretary of Education, as you just said, who won't clearly state that she will not support federal funding for schools that discriminate, when she says that she won't support making sure that you don't privatize things like special education and after-school programs that are being cut, we don't see where we can work with someone who cannot clearly say, I will protect all students. For us, that's job one. All students, all children deserve a safe place to go to school, and we believe that they deserve to go to a school that is well-resourced and has everything they need, access and opportunity.
Lily Eskelsen Garcia, former Congressman Dick Zimmer, thank you both for being part of the conversation.
My pleasure.
Pleasure.